Hi guys, welcome back to my channel for another plan with me. For today's spread, we are going to be decorating our mini dashboard happy planner using some stamped images from Fawn as well as our distress inks and watercolors. So let's get started. First of all, I will be using the back side of these happy planner planning guides only because it is a very smooth surface, but you can use absolutely anything with a non-porous surface. Even a ceramic plate would work just perfect, or the cover of an old planner. Then I will be using my distress ink in Mermaid Lagoon and my blending brush, which is linked in my favorites in Amazon. And as usual, I will start adding the ink to my piece of paper, which in this case is a piece of Strathmore watercolor paper, which is pretty thick by the way, because again it's watercolor paper, so it's more like a thick cardstock. And right now you can see the real speed. I am going very slowly and very carefully, adding a bit of ink at a time and building up my color. But now that you have seen that, you already know the drill, so let's speed things up a little bit. And the width of the piece of watercolor is about 2 inches wide, and it is the same height as my mini planner, which is about 7 inches tall. Then I cut another piece of watercolor paper, and this time it completely covers the corner box in the right side of my spread, and I will be doing the same with the Mermaid Lagoon. And then I will use my antique linen distress ink and I will add it to the bottom of my pieces of paper to make it look like sand. But I don't want my sand color to be mixed with the blue, so I clean first my surface with a bit of water and a cloth. And even though for this part I used a smooth surface, just because I prefer that, because that way I can reuse my surface over and over again, still you do not need a slick surface for this part. You can just put a piece of paper underneath to protect your table, and that should work just fine. And as you can notice, I left a tiny bit of white space between the blue and the antique linen, because the antique linen is more of a yellowish color and I didn't want a green between my sand and my ocean. And then I soaked my brush with water and I added some splatters to my ocean. After that, I will take my distress ink pad and I will smoosh it a little bit into my smooth surface, which is where you will actually need a non-porous surface. And with water, I will water down that ink and I will add some blue splatters this time. Now, I should have waited for the blue splatters a little bit because I will actually use my piece of cloth to pick up the clean water that I added at first, and that completely took away the blue splatters. So I should have added those at the end, since I will have to add the blue splatters again now. But if you make the same mistake, no big deal, you just repeat the process and add the blue splatters back. And the reason why I picked up the clean water is because that way you pick up a bit of ink from the background and you create some actually white splatters. And all these splatters I think look great with an underwater scene. And I already had some images stamped and cut out, so I went ahead and I used those. And they are also in watercolor paper, and I started using my watercolor paints, but I just couldn't get in the colors that I wanted. I think in part because this Strathmore watercolor paper doesn't work great with these more premium watercolors, and also because I am not very experienced with these watercolors in specific, so I just couldn't make them work for me in this case, for which I went back to what I already know the best, which is my distress inks. And once again, I need my smooth surface in this case because I will be smooshing some of that ink on it and adding a bit of water. I will be using them basically as watercolors. And more specifically, I will be using picked raspberry, mustard seed, and spiced marmalade. And I will have them also linked in my Amazon favorites. And I will also have in there the brush that I am using. Anyhow, I would actually suggest you to use a cheaper brush because at least in the way that I am coloring these images and the way that I usually do the watercoloring on these stamped images, is not the best one to use better brushes like this one because I am kind of mistreating my brush. So again, I wouldn't recommend the best brush for something like this. You will be just fine with an affordable and cheap brush. Maybe not a Crayola brush, you know, but an affordable brush that you can find either on Amazon or Michaels. That being said, I am basically adding water to the area that I want to color first, and then I am picking up a bit of ink with water and I am just adding the color, trying to add a bit of a gradient from the darker to the lighter, and even mixing the pink with the orange to make it look a little more orangey and to create my own colors, and just making sure to have fun. Then I will use the same antique linen distress ink as well as vintage photo to color in the skin of the mermaids. And as you can see, I use my towel a lot to pick up color and water that I might have added in excess. And you can always do that. If you add too much water or too much ink, just use your towel or even a piece of paper towel to pick it up and try again. And also feel free to mix the inks to create your own colors. If the antique linen is too light or too yellowish, just add a tiny bit of the vintage photo or any other color to make it a little darker or a little more pink. Then I also used a bit of watered down pink color on the cheeks just because I think that looks really cute. And by the way, the black ink that I used for the mermaids is from Archival ink because it's waterproof, so it will not smear with all the water. Then I will use again my distress inks to stamp some of the solid images from the stamp set, but before stamping them, I will slightly spray them with water, and that way they will almost look like if they were also watercolored in the paper. And with some of them, I will even add 2 different colors to give them a bit more of dimension, and I will use my brush to mix the colors a little bit on the paper, and maybe I mixed them a little too much, but I hope you get the idea. And this is mostly try and error. You just have to practice to get it the way that you want. I could have done it a few times in a scrap of paper just to make sure I had the right colors together or the right amount of blending, but I didn't, and that is okay. I mean, this is just a spread for myself. And I think that either way, it will turn out really cute and pretty anyway. So of course you don't have to get it perfect, but it is a fun technique, so you can certainly practice as much as you can just for fun. And you could just use regular inks for these. You don't need to create any gradient or anything like that. Just use a solid color for all of your images and that would look just really pretty as well. Even in black, I think they would look like a silhouette, which could look really fun and add some contrast. As usual, remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't and give me a thumbs up if you want to support my channel and my videos. I'll really appreciate it. Now I will take some of the smaller outlined images in the stamp set to add more detail to my scenes and some more fun elements like a sea star and some fishes. Again, I am using my archival ink, which is waterproof. That is very important because we will be adding color to these ones, because we will be adding some color to all of these little images. So we don't want our black ink to bleed. And I will also be adding some of those images to the hair of the mermaids to add an accessory to them, which I think always looks so pretty and cute. And I wish I had done that with the sea star as well and the mermaid over there, but I remembered that after I had already stamped my sea star. As you can see, I stamped like a pearls tiara on one of the mermaids, and so I will be using my jelly roll pen from Sakura in white to color in the pearls, but you can color them into any color that you prefer. I just really like white pearls, so I went with white. And then I used my distress inks again with a bit of water to add color to the other images, and I used the water and the cloth technique to pick up the color in the background that was already in there and make some areas white before going in with a different color, just to make the color that I actually wanted in them stand out a little more. For the bubbles, I watered down all of the colors a lot to make them a lot lighter, and I just went in with them and added a tiny bit of each one of the colors to the bubbles to create an iridescent effect. They're so tiny that it's barely noticeable, but I actually like how they look in person. And for the fishes, I also used in the same colors that I had been using in the mermaids and in the rest of the images and all of that to tie everything together and add a tiny bit of extra color to those spots. Now that all the distress ink and water is dry, I went ahead and I used my jelly roll pen in black to outline all of those solid images that did not have an outline in the first place, just to make everything a little more consistent, since all of the other images had an outline in black. And I just went in with my pen over the edge of all of those images. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, so that was pretty quick to do. And after that, I just taped everything down on my pages. Since I was so out of practice, this whole coloring took me forever, so I left the rest of the spread very simple, because after all, the scenes that I created were the main decoration of the spread. So to finish off the spread, I just added some of these washi headers from Simply Gilded, and the link to her shop is in the description of my video. And it is perforated, so I just took some pieces out of the roll and I used them just as they are, although you will see that I ended up cutting the end of them into a diagonal because I felt like that gave them a finishing touch. Then I used a light blue Tombow marker as usual for my days to add a bit more of blue to this page, since it already had a lot of blue on the other page, and that always helps balancing everything out. After that, I again used my distress inks and some of the smaller stamps just to add some decoration color and also to create some bullets, but the distress ink bled a little bit through my page. To me, it will not really be a problem because I know I will be able to cover it up once I decorate in the other page. but still wanted to point that out. It will probably bleed through your page. Then I used the second generation stamping technique where you stamp on a scrap piece of paper first, and then with whatever ink is left in your stamp, you stamp on your final piece of paper, because I wanted to stamp out in this seahorse. And after that I went with my pen and I outlined it again. I should have waited for the ink to dry before going in with my pen, but I didn't, so I still got some ghosting, but not as much bleed as I would have if I had fully gone with just the black ink pad. And now instead of coloring it with water and my watercoloring brush, I am using the colorless blender marker from Tombow, and I am removing the excess of ink from it on a scrap piece of paper, as you can see, to do not get the paper too wet, because otherwise it will still bleed through my page. And then I took the single bubble from the stamp set, and I also used the second generation stamping with my distress ink this time to create some bullet points. Again, this spread turned out pretty simple in my opinion, but that is just enough for my week. I think the coloring and the images do not need much more than that, so I really hope you like it as well. Please give me a thumbs up if you do. I'll leave you the supplies in the description box, but let me know if you have any other questions in the comments section. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, take care and stay safe. Bye!